All right, everybody. This is the first episode of what we just decided to call the breakdown with Levi Morgan. So I went on my Instagram last night, posted what we were going to do today, and I'm going to take 5 questions out of this that you guys asked me on my social media. Archery specific technique, hunting, all that stuff. The breakdown name is kind of like in archery, we get breakdowns, equipment failures. So we get to call a breakdown per tournament, which allows us to go fix ourselves, our equipment, whatever went wrong in that tournament. So the double meaning side of that would be breaking down your questions, topics, really diving deep into archery specific stuff. I'm not good at a lot of things, but archery has been my life. So I feel like we can confidently dive in and maybe help you guys with some of your questions. So getting started, let's go to the first question that was asked here that we picked. How do you aim at a live animal? Most people just get pins on the animal and fire the shot. This is from 42 Jimmer. Well, I think the biggest mistake people make when aiming at a live animal is they aim where they want to hit. And almost all animals that I've hunted, even elk, and especially whitetail, duck. Well, we say duck, but they're not actually ducking. They're like pouncing almost, or like crouching to lunge is what they're doing. Like getting ready to leave the scene when they hear the bow go off or they hear the arrow flying through the air. Most of the time, honestly, they're hearing the arrow fly through the air. So you want to aim lower than you want to hit. I think a good rule of thumb here is to aim lower third in the animal. If you're looking at an elk, maybe way thicker, but still aim lower third, kind of heart area. That way, if he doesn't move at all, because sometimes they don't, they're it's an uncontrollable situation. If he doesn't move at all, you smoke him in the heart. If he ducks a foot, you hit the top of the lungs. So that really gives you your biggest margin of error. However, if they're 10 yards away, don't aim low. They don't have time to duck at 10 yards. Even with my setup at 20 yards, 25 yards, I'm really aiming lungs because they don't have time to react with my speed out of my setup. Now, the slower your bow is, you're going to have to figure that out on your own. But once you get to 30 yards, 40 yards, which 40 to 50 yards, in my opinion, is the worst distance to shoot an animal because they hear the bow very, very loudly. They hear the arrow coming, and they still have time to react. Once you get out 70, 80 yards, they don't hear the bow go off. They just hear the arrow. And if you're shooting an LRP system, tack vanes, a really quiet setup, you don't have to really worry about that too much. So I think, depending on the speed of your bow, I would say 35 to 50 yards is a really tough distance, and that's where you should definitely be aiming lower third heart area on an animal. So I hope that answered your question, 42 Jimmer. Yeah, don't just put all your pins on the animal. Really take the time to focus in and aim low. Next question from Nate_Cough12. How important is shot timing, and how do I figure out what mine is? So, shot timing is very important because people have, and I have, what I call a window, like a shot window, where my shot, I'm aiming well, I feel strong, and it needs to break in that window. For me, that is about a 6-second window. Once I anchor and that pin settles, I got about 4 to 6 seconds before that pin starts to move and my shot starts to break down. Everybody's window is different. Guys like Dan McCarthy, guys like Chance Bobev, their shot window and shot is way bigger. They can aim great for a longer period of time. And I think that's what has to tell you, the shorter your window is, the more important your shot timing is. So I have a pretty short window, so my timing is very important. I've found that the quicker that shot fires, my impact is a little higher. And the longer that shot takes, so the later it fires, my impact starts to go a little lower. So in tournament situations, hunting situations, especially hunting, a lot of people get in a hurry and they shoot quicker than they normally do in practice. Where in practice, you're kind of relaxed. I'm going to aim for a little while, boom, fire the arrow. That's how you sight in. Well, you go hunting, you pull back, you're very strong, boom, fire that shot. Your impact probably is going to be a little higher because you are shooting a stronger shot at that time. Now, if it's a deal where you have to aim for a lot longer, you're probably going to hit lower. And sometimes in tournaments, some people might call me crazy for doing this. If I'm aiming and it's just not firing, but I'm still holding good, I just know in my mind that I need to probably start creeping that pin up a little bit in the target. And so I'm talking about like very minutely, but I will kind of give myself that cushion because I know the longer it takes, the lower I'm going to hit, the weaker my shot's going to be. So shot timing is important, but it's not a deal where like I've been with guys in camp, and it's a terrible thing where they're doing like 1, 2, 3, trying to count to in their mind or A, B, C, D, E. And that's terrible because if you pass where you think you need to be by a second, you automatically take it as a negative and freak out. So it's more of a make a decision when you pull back. As soon as that pin settles, we're going to start the execution of the release, and we're not going to stop it. So it's just a steady squeeze, boom, 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 fire. And that's the best way to get a good, solid timing down. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. But first and foremost, figure out what your window of time is to make a great shot. Next question. Electric_outdoors. How important is leveling your bow during a shot, and how do you make it repetitive? Well, I think it's very important. I was actually dealing with this with my son yesterday. He was hitting right, and I got behind him and watched, and he wasn't leveling his bow. And the further you go in distance, the more important it is. At 20 yards, you can get away with most anything, especially in a hunting situation. At 50 yards, not the case at all. If your bubble is a quarter bubble out, you're talking a pretty big impact change. So it's very important to have everything level. But even more importantly, in my opinion, it is you need to have your bow balanced. And then it's going to make leveling your bow that much better. So I'm taking into consideration your first, second, third axis is all perfect. Leveled. That's the first thing you want to do. Make sure everything's perfect. Then if you don't do anything to your bow and you just go outside and you got your rest on the right side of your bow, your sight on the right side of your bow, and if you're crazy and shoot with your quiver on, it's all on, if you're right-handed, on the same side of your bow. So that bow is wanting to lean to the right. So when you pull back, in order to level it, you have to intentionally pull the bow level. So what you're doing is influencing that grip, adding torque to that grip with your thumb side, just to get that bow level. So balancing your bow is the most important. That's why I run a V-bar or a back bar off of my bow, so that when I want to be able to pull back with my eyes closed, open them, and that bow be level. So do that over and over again. You can tweak that back bar and the front bar until you can pull back with your eyes closed, open them, the level's level. That way, it's going to be easy for you to make any minute adjustments to that. You're not adding any influence to that grip at all. So yeah, leveling your bow is very, very important, but balancing your bow is going to make leveling the bow easier with less torque, and I think balance is more important. Okay, how many questions was that? 1, 2, 3. Fourth question, Jason Boris asks, I think I butchered that, but the question is, hitting 12s in practice, but in competition, it's hard to find where to aim, and then I rush the shot. Yeah, I think that is probably a form of situational target panic, and it's not the target panic that most people think about where they just punch the release, but it's where in your mind you feel, when you get in a situation that you feel pressure, you feel nervous, your mind automatically wants you to get in a hurry. In hunting, you see the same thing. You stop a deer, or a deer comes through feeding, and in your mind you perceive it as he's about to run. And we've seen this because we film our hunts. He's about to run. You make the shot, and you go rewatch it, and he was feeding. And you're like, man, I really remember that as I needed to hurry. So tournament situations are exactly the same. Some of the biggest losses I can remember that were self-inflicted losses that I've had were because I got in a hurry and I didn't stick to my process. I let my mind start to wonder and think about what's at stake and to think about what's riding on this shot, right? And think about, and in practice, you're not thinking about those things. You're just shooting and you're staying loose, you're staying in your process, and you're finding those 12s. So you ask, it's hard to find where to aim, and then you rush the shot. Well, that's the most important part. If you don't know where to aim, you can't hit it. It's hard to hit anything that you don't know where it is. It's hard enough to hit it when you can see it. So, in 3D, learning the targets is very important because we don't have an orange dot on the targets. We don't have always something to just put our pin on. You have to become very good at, you need good optics for one. You have to be able to find that 12 with your optics. You don't necessarily have to be able to see it with your naked eye, but I need to be able to see those 12s with my optics first and foremost. And then I can find things, then I pull the binos down, find dark spots, find lines, find other arrows in the target, find a hole, find a shadow that I can see with my naked eye. Then I'll find it with my binoculars. And then I reference that. Okay, the 12, I need to come up an inch and left 2 inches from that shadow. And I just keep pulling down and pulling back up until I have a good reference and a good aiming spot that I know very closely to where the center of that 12 is. And so what you also need to remember is like close enough isn't good enough. I'm not area aiming. So like really pick a tiny spot that you think you can focus on that gives you the best chance of hitting that 12. So you're not always just seeing the 12s. Very rarely, I'd say in a 20 target 3D course, I might be able to see 2 of the 12s I aim at. And if I only hit 2 12s in a 20 target range, they're going to shake my hand and tell me better luck next time. So you have got to figure out how to hit what you can't see, but you have to know where it is. So become good at finding shadows, dark spots, arrows, holes, changes in the target, details in that target that you can see with your naked eye, not your binoculars. Find them with your naked eye, then find them with the binoculars. Reference to the 12. As far as rushing your shot, you have got to find a way to slow yourself down. In those moments when everything starts to get hectic, your heart rate goes up, you start to feel your face get flush, like what everybody feels when their adrenaline spikes and it's like a high pressure situation. Everything in your brain is telling you to run and do it quickly because you want that result now. Like you want to skip through the process and get to the result. Like I want that 12. I want to get this over with. I don't like the way I feel. Nobody likes that feeling of pressure. It's miserable. I've had it so bad at times in Vegas and places and shooting World Cup in Europe where I almost threw up in the trash can. Like everything wants you to rush, but you have got to be able in that moment, as soon as you feel that, to go, no, slow everything down. And like I tell myself, that's one of the things I tell myself is slow it down. Like just slow motion. Almost imagine everything you're doing in slow motion. And that honestly will calm you down enough for you to get back in your process, to execute the right way, and to make a good shot. There's a lot of answers to that question. That's kind of an overview of how I would handle that. I could literally go on for an hour on how to slow your mind down and things that Joel Turner's talked about. And maybe I'll just run through that real quick. So Joel Turner, I talked to him about this, and it's a form of target panic when you rush like that. He said, how determined would you have to be to walk through a house that's on fire? And I said, I'd have to be pretty determined, Joel. and he said, well, that's how you have to approach that high pressure moment. It's because everything in your mind is on fire, but you have to figure out how to walk instead of run. And so when he said that to me, it just clicked and it made total sense, because if you've ever been in a high pressure situation shooting a bow, that's exactly what it feels like. It feels like everything around you is on fire and you just want to run through the process to get out the back door. And so every time I'm in a high pressure situation, I remember what Joel said. He said, how determined do you have to be to walk through a house that's on fire? And so that gives me the determination and the understanding of what I'm feeling and what I have to do in that moment to slow myself down. So maybe the next time you feel rushed, just think those thoughts. It really helped me. So let's move on to the final question. What method, techniques do you use to calm yourself for high pressure shots? Okay, we're going to use that in another podcast. It was the exact same thing I just did. All right, let's move on to the fifth question. This is from Ryan.Paraseshi. When you win for the first time, how do you mentally attack proving it's not a fluke? Okay. That's a good question. Because everybody's like, the first one is the hardest. The first win is the hardest. And I would totally disagree. That's actually a great question. And because I remember feeling that. Because I won my first one, which was very difficult. The first one is hard. Hattiesburg, Mississippi, 2007, my first professional win. And I had tried to prove myself over and over. And finally did it, set a world record, the highest score ever shot in an ASA tournament, still to this day. Then I go to the next tournament and totally bomb, get like 18th place, like not even close. And then even though nobody's looking at you like you're a fluke, you're looking at yourself that way. And that was the way I was looking at myself. I wanted to prove to myself more than anything that no, this wasn't a one and done. I have to dig in and win again. And so I won the next tournament, Augusta, Georgia. But then a week later, I feel the same feeling. And that feeling, unfortunately, never goes away. I thought if I win 5, I'll feel like, no, it's not a fluke. I'm good to go. I'm the man. That's what you want to feel. But for me, it's always kind of been a bit of almost imposter syndrome. Like, I don't know if I can win again. But it's also been the thing that really has been the driving force, I think, behind winning Shooter of the Year 12 years in a row. Was that I felt like I constantly had to prove to myself that it wasn't a fluke. The first one wasn't a fluke. Like, I am that good. I want to be that good. I put in the work. But still, that little doubt creeps in the back of your mind. And so to me, people's like, what was your most important win? And my answer has always been the same. It's the next one. Because I'm constantly still proving to myself that I've got what it takes. And those first 178 majors were not a fluke. So I guess it's never changed for me since the first win. I've still been trying to prove that it wasn't a fluke. And here we are 16 years later. So, but I also think it's a great thing. When you get satisfied and feel like, yeah, I've got it. I've made it. That's when a lot of people start going backwards. You know, they don't have anything to prove anymore. And my dad's told me 100 times, like, I have a rough day at a tournament. He's like, you don't have anything to prove to anybody. But deep down, I'm like, yeah, I feel like I do. You know, I'm not finished. I'm not done. I still have a lot to prove to myself. And I don't know if that'll ever go away. I think you kind of have to have that fire as a competitor to be successful. So hope that answered your questions. And that was the first episode, or whatever you want to call it, of the breakdown. So I took 5 questions today. Some days I might do 10. Sometimes I might just get on here and talk about a topic I want to dive into and really go into detail about. So this is something a little different, but it's a really cool way for me to take problems and questions that you guys have and break them down and try to answer them in more detail. Sometimes if I do a live on Instagram or Facebook, it's hard for me to go into that much detail because I need to get to the next question fast. And so this is more of a breakdown of those questions and try to answer them in more detail. So thank you guys for sending your questions. Keep them coming. We're going to try to keep doing these breakdowns, and hopefully it helped you guys out.